set aside money for health care, they can do it. Not only Medicare recipients, but also active military personnel. And so essentially a lot of folks are using, it's like 20 million people are using HSAs, and they've really expanded in the last few years with these types of plans, and it makes sure that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, from government, but essentially people control their own health care costs, and they put that money aside, and it's really been effective and is showing some positive results. We're trying to expand it by removing some of the onerous regulations. For example, as you know, for those of you who do have these accounts, you have not been able to purchase simple over-the-counter medication unless you have a doctor's prescription to use your account for this. So if you want to, buy Advil or Claritin, an allergy medication for your son or daughter, you have to go to the doctor to get a prescription for Advil or for Claritin, and it makes no sense at all. And so that's another one of the provisions that we're trying to reverse or go in a different direction on, and I'm hopeful it's actually going to be included at some point at the end of the year. We want to make sure people are going to be lining up to ask questions. So if you'd like to ask a question, dial *3 on your telephone. You'll right away go into a queue. Someone will grab you, and we'll just start rolling through the questions as soon as we can. So dial *3 on your phone. I'm also going to ask a quick question, just a quick poll question, just to get your perspective, a good flash poll, if you will, on an issue. And we'll ask for your input on that. Again, dial *3 on your telephone, though, if you'd like to ask a question. And I'll hit two other issues before we open up the lines. But again, dial *3 and you'll go right into the queue. And one is the IRS. You remember 2 years back, there were so many Americans, we were all shocked to find out that the IRS was targeting people based on their personal beliefs. And oversight of the IRS is critical. It is critical to make sure that those who are collecting the taxes are playing by the same rules as those who are paying taxes. And this week in the House, in my committee, we will be taking up a series of bills that should pass pretty quickly that are aimed at essentially reforming and reining in the IRS in a couple different areas. Number one, we'll be passing a bill that will ensure that the IRS does not have employees with delinquent tax debt, because there was a report recently that found that as many as over 1,500 employees at the IRS weren't paying their taxes. And so, employees need to follow the exact same rule. IRS employees need to follow the exact same rules as they're enforcing on you, the taxpayer. And so we're making sure that that's going to be passed. That'll also pass with another bill this week that'll add a little bit more integrity to the IRS by prohibiting the IRS from rehiring any employees that have been fired for misconduct. And the reason that's important is that because it was found also that the agency had rehired 140-some employees that had been previously fired for misconduct. They were fired for misconduct. They were fired for not paying their taxes. And this is all designed to improve customer service, essentially. And again, that's going to be a focus. We should be able to pass those initiatives with pretty strong bipartisan support. I'm anticipating in the near future in the committee this week. And that's important. And then finally, I mentioned the Zika virus that's been in the news a lot lately. The spread of that virus in Central and South America in particular, it's really concerning. And you have Wisconsin now with a number of cases that have been linked to Zika from travel, and thousands of cases of birth defects in Latin America. That's 300 cases in the United States or something like that. We took action in the House today to pass legislation. I think Senator Franken has the bill too in the Senate that would streamline the amount of time that potential Zika vaccines and drugs and solutions can be brought to market through the FDA for that approval process. And so we just want to make sure we're finding vaccines quicker, and the development of a vaccine is obviously going to protect Americans from a really serious disease, especially those who travel, and it's transmitted in contact back in the United States or with mosquitoes. So again, dial *3 on your telephone if you'd like to ask a question. And then finally, let me just mention this before we open the lines. You may have seen the news article recently that was written about our office on all this casework that we've been able to help people individually throughout the district. And these are veterans payments, problems with red tape with the federal government. We had someone, for instance, that was owed about $3,700 in taxes for their refund, and they weren't getting it with the IRS. And so we helped intervene. We made sure that the couple got their money they deserve. $3,700 is a lot of money. So if you have issues with the IRS, if you have issues with making sure your passports, for instance, are up to date, or you need it turned around quicker, there's an issue, we can help with that. If there are issues with immigration cases, things like that, we can assist and cut through red tape when needed. And don't hesitate to reach out. You can find that information online, obviously, at the website, or call the local Minnesota office. But there was a nice article written about how our office is essentially the most effective of all of them in Minnesota for handling that type of casework. We're going to open the lines, though, and kind of keep moving through, and I think we've got the first question on the line, and position looks like we may have taken up is Stu on the line. I think is it Stu might be from, I'm not sure where Stu's from, but I think we got Stu on the line.
Stu's from Minnetonka.
Hey, man, thanks for waiting, Stu.
Okay, because I missed you last time and I had a bunch of questions, but yeah, this is the most interesting period. Let me thank you for your service. I'll just state that I was not a career military, but served during the Vietnam period, and actually did not serve in Vietnam. I had the privilege of Libya and the Netherlands. And I will tell you the response from VA because I couldn't hear very well last time we were on the phone, and getting hearing aids, I finally just said to heck with it, and I've gone to Costco and bought my own. It's just a question of I don't have time in my life at this point, and I need to be able to hear. So my bigger concern is what is being done, what can be done to create competition on medicines. I'm in my mid-70s. I'm had a heart operation. I've had two different types of cancer. My wife has had recurring cancer, and we are classic medical cases. And I'm kind of almost going bankrupt, even though I had a pretty decent retirement pay. I've now done my taxes and realized I am just get burned. My own fault. I didn't have an HSA, so if anyone's listening and they can figure out how to put the HSA together, do it, because following the tax schedule, as convoluted as it is, I'll spend 10 or 20 hours trying to figure that out, and I may be able to take $5 off.
Okay.
And I will say, I'm not so concerned about the people who need just allergy medicine.
Right.
I have two different medicines that one costs $3 a day, one costs $5 a day, and I know people who are buying medicines that, for a single medicine, they're paying $10, $15 a day.
Right, a lot more.
Okay, and because of all of these, a good example is Cristor as a statin. I can't take most statins because my body reacts, and these things, I go in to buy them, and I buy a 3-month supply. That's $500. Bang, right off.
Okay.
So, I just would be curious to know what's being done to try to create competition on medicines. I am unequivocally not legal. I'm either going to get them out of Israel or out of Canada, and I'm an agnostic. It has nothing to do with religion. I'm just going broke. So, with that, I'm going to let you go, give you a couple of ideas to talk about.
Thank you, Stu. And actually, thanks for, first of all, thanks for your service and for sharing some of those early comments. And, very frustrating. Obviously, you just had to make the choice just to go get hearing aids on your own. And it kind of addressed some of that earlier veteran discussion that I had mentioned earlier, I guess. I also should mention that I'm supporting legislation that will allow the VA to essentially partner with outside hearing aid specialists to help veterans receive these types of services quicker. And that's really important. And so, we're waiting to receive, or those who are waiting to receive or be filled for hearing aid is one of the largest backlogs that's currently at the VA. And so, using outside resources to help partner with the VA is going to make some progress in this area too. On the area of drugs, for instance, so let's just talk about prescription drugs and the high costs that are available there. First, I am really concerned about this. You've had some of these big cases, in the news of sorts of hedge fund folks buying drugs, keeping a patent, driving up the price. That's a side issue, but there's also another way to address this issue, and that's addressing the backlog of new generic drug applications at the FDA, because when these patents run out, we want to make sure generics are basically going into the market, they're entering the market, because it's the generic drugs that, they cost less, they're not as expensive, but there is a backlog for these types of applications. On average, it's taken something around 50 months at the FDA just to approve a single generic application. And so a generic application, again, is just following up on an already approved application that has done a successful drug. And so by quickly processing the thousands of pending applications, we're going to help patient access, and we're going to lessen the expensive, versions of these types of drugs. think it's really important. I should also mention, too, and I don't know your special situation, but if any of you are listening and you have issues with drug pricing, there are certain resources out there where the government has partnered with different drug companies, for instance, on access. And those resources are available. I would just encourage you to reach out to either Matt in my Washington office or Margaret in my local Minnesota office, and we can get you the information to find out if you're eligible or help steer you in a direction just to make progress on that. And, and keep in mind, too, when we're looking at possible solutions, the bottom line is we got to make sure we're continuing to encourage innovation and, competition between these companies in different delivery models and promoting the use of generics and just, not embracing like a one-size-fits-all government price control or mandate situation, because obviously you want new drugs on the market, cancer drugs, et cetera, which can be really expensive, but you want the companies investing the research and development in it. We just got to make sure we've got the tools available to make sure that these processes are being applied more quicker to get on the market, especially the generics, as I mentioned earlier. So just a couple of thoughts on that. There's no easy answer on this, I know, because it's been changing over the last couple of years. The Medicare Part D program, by and large, has been real successful, too. It's come in way under budget in terms of cost savings that a lot of seniors also have been participating in. So we've got some opportunity there. Okay, we're going to keep rolling, I think, with our questions, and we got Kurt on the line. Kurt, thanks for waiting.
Yeah, you bet. I'm talking from Medina.
Oh, great.
My question's related to GMO labeling. Most of the publicity I've seen, most of the news has been related to action in the Senate. And I know Senator Klobuchar took some static for not jerking her knee quickly enough. Related to taking the. Let me tell you, I consider myself a progressive, but I like to look at the science behind issues, and this is an issue that has some very well-established science behind it, and I'm rather concerned about laws related to labeling food in a way that is going to lead consumers to believe that it's dangerous.
Oh, yeah, right.
Because it happens to have a GMO sticker on it. To me, frankly, I would be looking for it in order to buy it. But there's been a lot of negative publicity, basically by the organic, funded, as far as I can tell, by the organic marketing machine that wants to lead people to believe that the only path to purity and sustainability is through organic methods, which will not feed our population. Our population of the world is going to increase by 2050 to a point where we'll need to produce 87% more food than we do today. And picking weeds by hand is not going to do that. And we need to. Genetic engineering needs to be part of the arsenal, really, to help provide solutions to those issues. Anyway, so I'm curious where you stand on that. I think there's an evidence-based, science-based path to not only not delegitimizing what essentially is safe and sustainable practice and safe food, but to take even maybe to go further and take a positive stand towards teaching the population, helping to teach some of the science involved and take a position supporting the science behind genetic engineering as one kind of agricultural practice.
Well, Kurt, first of all, thanks for sharing those thoughts. And so, essentially what, and Kurt's referring to this GMO labeling, right? It's been talked about a little bit in the news. And personally, first and foremost, I believe that consumers have a right to know what's in the food they purchase, right? You have a right to know. But as you mentioned, science is really critical, and having a sort of established scientific path is key. I am concerned that you can't have a patchwork of 50 different states with different state laws on what their labeling is going to be. It just doesn't work because it's going to drive up prices all over the place, which is going to hurt consumers, right? And, because whether you're General Mills or some company in Minnesota, for instance, it's got to have different, labeling for their products in 50 states. It's not workable. It's not practical. And I do believe that we should have a voluntary national labeling standard. I have no problem with that allows consumers to have access to that type of information without hurting the choice. So you can have that balance. In fact, the House has voted on that, and I supported that, or that sort of procedure. Trusting science, and as you mentioned, that's how we fed everybody. If you think about decades ago, you're taught in school that basically has an unavailability of food resources, which we would have had happen had we not been able to feed people through advanced technology. And basing things on science for safety standards is critical, and we're doing that. And the United States has been doing that, or the agriculture community has been doing that. And we got to make sure that organics and other sources like that are going to be available on the market. And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's really important. It's a key incentive for those folks to actually get in the market. But again, it shouldn't be a mandated perspective. I think it should be just a common standard for voluntary national labeling that should allow consumers to make that choice. That's my feeling. We'll ask a poll question of all of you in just a little bit, but we're going to keep rolling through questions here. I think we got Barry from Minnetonka. Barry, thanks for waiting. Barry, if Barry's still there.
Hello?
Hey, Barry, you still there?
Hello?
Hey, Barry, how are you? You may be having trouble with keeping Barry in the line. Again, if you want to ask a question, go on *3 on your telephone. I think now we've got, we might have someone else on the line, and it looks like next one's not popping up, actually. So is it Eunice? Eunice from Edina?
Thank you. I am here.
Hi, Eunice.
Hi. I have a question I've asked many politicians, and no one seems to have the answer for this. But why do single people continue to pay higher taxes than married couples? And I know where the law started. Since the time that Social Security was established, it was decided that single people would pay more taxes since they did not have children to support. That goes way back from the beginning of time.
Okay.
But the law has never changed, and we as single people must pay more taxes than married couples. Are you aware of this?
Well, no.
Most people are not even aware of it. So
yeah.
We know the times have changed. So why do, and you look at it, most married couples have two people working. They have double the income of a single person, doubling the salary, yet a single person, there's not a tag on us in any way that when we walk into a grocery store or into a gas station say, I'm a single person, therefore I should get some kind of a price break on this. It's the same. You pay the same for gas, you pay the same for food, insurance, rent, homeowner, and on it goes. Clothing, whatever.
Yeah. Okay, well,
I would like somebody to look into that. I really would like someone to look into that.
Okay.
We should not be penalized. And it's like you are tax debt is what it is.
Well, I will. Okay, thank you. I will look into it actually. Typically, my understanding has been in the past because everyone has a common tax rate that they pay their taxes on. Income tax season is just around the corner, as everyone knows, coming up next Monday. But it actually has been married couples that have had a penalty in the tax code periodically, sometimes at the state level, sometimes at the federal level, which has had to been fixed or patched. Because if you get married or you're declared as a married couple, you've essentially been penalized where you will be paying more unless that marriage penalty has been put in place, that the fix has been put in place, which it has been over the last several years. Now, part of the issue, too, is you mentioned children. Now, if you do have kids or children, there is new eligibility that just started in the last couple of decades for child tax credits and child deductions. And so, obviously, that's going to help you lower your taxes right off the bat there. And that's a social policy that was decided by government a long time ago. And in fact, some some of the presidential candidates have talked about expanding that, and actually making it more generous. Personally, I believe it would be just smarter to have a tax code if you're going to do reform to make it simpler, to make it flatter, eliminate a lot of these deductions and loopholes that tend to favor different groups, and I think you get the most efficiency out of that type of situation, and you're probably going to get the most economic growth out of that type of situation. So, but I'll look into it a little bit, and I've got your contact info too. I'll talk to my tax guy and see if we, can get a little more detail on it too. Here's the poll question I want to ask all of you that are listening tonight. It's a simple question, but this issue has come up where, unfortunately, Congress, as I mentioned, is going to have to act on a bill. We're going to have to act on a bill on the IRS because they've been essentially employing a lot of people, as discovered by the Inspector General, that the employees themselves aren't paying their taxes. So the question is, should the IRS employ individuals that are willfully delinquent on their taxes? If you think yes, that's okay, that they should be employing those folks that are willfully delinquent in their taxes, hit 1 on your telephone. That means yes. Hit 2 if no, you don't think that the IRS should not be employing those individuals. Hit no. And if you're unsure, just press 3, because again, sometimes you have to have more information. It's a simple, easy, question. But if you think the IRS should continue to employ individuals that are willfully delinquent on their taxes, press 1 on your phone. 2, no, we should not be having IRS employees delinquent on their taxes, collecting your taxes, press 2. Or if you're unsure, press 3, again, because, sometimes it's not as simple black and white as you make the question appear, and I understand that. But it is something that we will have to take some action on later this week, and you'll probably be hearing a little bit more about it in the near future, too, because the IRS has been having difficulty with their customer service aspect as well, with only like a third of customers getting through online or having to be on the wait line, because they've been diverting their resources to other areas of internal budgets, which a lot of us don't think is appropriate. So that's the quick snap poll. You could provide some input on. Okay, we're going to go live. I think we get Joe from Eden Prairie. Joe, thanks for waiting.
Hi, Congressman.
Hey, thanks for waiting.
Yeah, no problem. First of all, I just want to say thank you for these town hall meetings. I really appreciate hearing them and being able to speak with you directly. It's refreshing. Second of all, I just wanted to ask you, I know it's been just an absolutely crazy presidential race with Trump and everything. Yeah. I'm just curious, is there any candidate right now that you're leaning towards? And if why are you leaning towards them?
Yeah, well, again, and we won't get too much into the politics on the call, but I get asked about this all the time. It's obviously it's on the news all the time, and my perspective is this: I have always believed that when you have someone who's going to be president, we have an election coming up. I like governors. Governors have done a good job of working with legislatures, balancing budgets, executive authority. None of the governors were doing very well, essentially in the race, and weren't doing that well. I actually was supporting Rubio because I like sort of the younger generation, new leader, aspirational sort of approach to attracting people in a positive light. I like that, and he didn't go very far, apparently. So I haven't weighed in at all right now. I've got concern about some of the candidates running now because, look, I think you have to do more than just be against things. I think you need to be for things. I think you need to be positive. So I'm just kind of, focusing on my perspective of just getting stuff done. Because regardless of who's president, we still will have divided government. We still will have to make progress on some real significant issues, whether it's the national debt, whether it's defense issues or leadership around the world in those areas. And so I think the country's, craving substantive leadership or answers, and I hope a lot of that gets figured out in the next, couple of months at least. So that's just, I haven't weighed in and endorsed anyone else at this point because, my guy ended up bowing out, unfortunately. So there you go. Okay, we got Chuck from Minnetonka. Chuck, thanks for waiting.
Yeah, I'm an optimist here, and I'm trying to look for positive things.
Okay.
So, Congressman, you're in the majority in the House. Our Republicans control the Senate. We've got a president that's a Democrat. What are you most optimistic about happening that's good before President Obama's term is completed in these next months? I'd hate to think that we'd be incapable of getting good things to happen.
Yeah.
In parens, I'd add Cuba, a place where I've recently visited.
Sure.
And your thoughts on Cuba?
Yeah, okay, really, it's a great question. So one thing kind of pops out, and thanks actually, Chuck, for the question. One thing pops out with is a real opportunity to make headway bipartisanly with Congress, both House and Senate, and the President. And it actually follows on the heels of the human trafficking progress that we made that I was working on with Senator Klobuchar, for instance. We got all those provisions signed into law. It's literally saving lives. The other area we can save lives in the next month, potentially here, is the heroin epidemic, the opiate epidemic, where we're doing some things that are going to be very different for allowing resources and attention and anecdotes to flow to availability for law enforcement and otherwise to essentially address a very significant problem where there's a lot of unneeded deaths that are occurring essentially every day. And it's happening in the suburbs in Minnesota. This is a more common, prevalent problem than in the past because of the availability of prescription drugs. And so some of the organizations in Minnesota, like Hazelton and others, have come forward with some good answers and solutions. We've been working with local drugstores like Walgreens and others, and coming up with some common ideas. And I think there's going to be some initiatives passing in the near future on that. It'll be done very bipartisanly, and hopefully we'll get it signed into law in the near future. On Cuba, let me just mention that, look, I'm an advocate. I went to Cuba in October. It was very interesting to me to find a very pro-American Cuban people. Very small business oriented. The government itself, the Castro regime, is certainly not of that same caliber, but I think they also recognize that they're not going to be able to hold off, sort of their people from freedom and access to investment. And so hopefully, I'm an advocate for lifting the trade embargo because I think it's going to actually lead to more progress in this whole different area. And that's just my perspective. I know some have a different perspective, but you've had this policy in place for 50-some years. The United States is the only country with this policy where we've essentially, I think, allowed the Castro regime to essentially point to the United States and say, you're the reason that we're in poverty or we're not doing well. And we'll take that excuse away if we lift the embargo. And I think you're going to have more access to a lot of American goods and services, which is going to open up the door for more opportunity. That's my perspective there. That is probably not going to happen in the next month or actually even under this president because we've got some leadership in the House and Senate that don't feel that way, bipartisanly, actually. And so that's kind of being held up a little bit. But I do think it's going to be an issue that will be addressed, regardless of who the next president is. That's going to be front and center, and I think we're going to see progress on that. Okay, we got Steve from Bloomington on the line. Thanks for waiting.
Yeah, thanks for taking my call. I was just kind of curious if there's been any progress made on not taxing Social Security. It just feels like the tax of Social Security pushes a lot of, breaks up a lot of families. I think our extended families end up feel like they have to leave the state. Just because of high taxes here. I'm just wondering if there's been any progress made on that.
Well, okay, it's actually a good question. I'll be honest. I know there has not been much of a conversation around federally about ending the tax on benefits for Social Security benefits. There's been legislation offered through the years. In fact, I think I've signed on once when that was taken up or introduced. But it hasn't had a serious conversation about moving forward. When we had the end-of-year tax legislation last year that passed to give more certainty to a lot of folks that were wondering if certain provisions were going to expire or stay in place for year after year. This was not included in it. I do know, though, that at the state legislature, there is debate going on right now on a proposal. I've read about it. That state legislators are talking about proposals that would essentially eliminate state taxes on Social Security benefits, right? To try and keep retired individuals in Minnesota as an example. So, my feeling is, bottom line, just knowing some of the challenges we have with Social Security and Medicare, I just want to make sure, and I will remain committed to preserving and protecting Social Security, for folks that are using it now and making it sure that we've got it there in the future for the next generation, which I think is really key. Okay, we're going to keep rolling. I think we've got Ken from Maple Grove. Ken, if you're on the line.
Yes, good evening, Congressman. How are you tonight?
Good. Thanks for waiting.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I really appreciate talking to you, and I think if the Congress and the Senate were filled with a lot more people like you who are willing to work across the aisle, it would be a much more productive place.
Well, you're very kind. Yeah, it's an interesting environment. Let's put it that way. So
it is, but I appreciate the opportunity to see somebody like yourself who makes an effort to work both ways with people and come to compromise. Anyways, one of the things that hasn't really been mentioned at all, and it's certainly not an election issue or anything, but the question of infrastructure across the country.
Okay.
We've got decaying road systems, bridges, power grids, that sort of thing. What is there any talk of or any thought towards a national plan to correct some of this before it just turns into garbage, basically? I mean, and whether you're pro, whether you believe in climate change or not, there are certainly still some good arguments for going towards some sort of program for solar energy, maybe in housing, new housing construction, that sort of thing.
Okay.
Is there any plans towards any of that? I mean,
okay. Well, first of all, let me just tell you this, and thanks. It's actually a really good question. Here's one good thing that happened last fall. It actually happened after we got a new speaker, we had leadership changes, et cetera. But for the first time in over a decade, we ended up having a conference committee, a real conference committee, where the House and the Senate actually worked out some differences and passed a long-term transportation bill. So they put a bill in place for essentially 5-6 years. So it wasn't the typical, we're going to do it for a year, we're going to do it for 6 months. Contractors who are building roads or whatever for infrastructure plans, they have to plan. They got to get people in the pipeline to hire, to have skilled people, et cetera. So it wasn't working doing this year after year short-term stuff. So the long-term perspective is definitely going to be helpful. I personally do think, well, and I'll let you know, there is not an answer right now or a proposal that has gotten behind either Republican or really Democrat, actually, that says, well, this is our infrastructure plan. But as an example, Tim Walz and I, now he's a Democrat from southern Minnesota, he and I have talked a lot about, we introduced bills in the past together where essentially we invest in infrastructure by using new energy royalties through expanded leases and exploration, et cetera, and just dedicating all of that money in infrastructure, and including, wastewater treatments, locks and dams, all that stuff. And it was found or scored to be the largest investment in infrastructure in the history, essentially, of the country. And but we could not get any traction on or support for it from some of our colleagues. And I think that's where we're going to have to go, and it's where we need to go within the next 5 years on this transportation bill before it expires, because you got to get that in the pipeline. You got to get it going now. You can't just turn it on when the next bill runs out. You got to plan ahead for it. And obviously, with new technology going on in this area, there is opportunity for that. Now, of course, there's renewables and good things happening. And, look, the government should provide basic research for solar, for wind, things like that, and have sort of all the above energy. So some of that is going on now. And just, there'll be a little more focus maybe on that. But, I feel we had some good progress, for instance, on the long-term transportation side. But now we need the next step, right? We need to actually have kind of the next answer or the next step. Okay, it looks like we're going to keep rolling. It looks like we've got John on the line. John, thanks for waiting.
Hey, Congressman.
Hey, good.
Thanks, as always, for having these calls. I think people are telling you it's a wonderful service you do for us, and thanks for serving as well.
Yeah, thank you.
The question I have for you concerns corporate inversions, and actually, it's a little sensitive, and so I ask it with the utmost respect, if I can, please.
Sure.
I'm really somewhat disappointed in your ongoing support for the medical device, repealing the medical device tax, because of what Medtronic has done to us. They did the largest corporate inversion that's been done, and we're left holding the bag for all the taxes that they're not paying, and yet you continue to support repealing the medical device tax. And here I am, I run a business, I'm trying to create jobs here in town, and we keep doing these programs that are targeted at these other people. So I guess my question is, do you feel that Medtronic kind of left you hanging because you were trying to do a service? I don't agree with the targeted way you did it, but you tried. I think your intent was good, and I want to give you credit for that. But Medtronic's intent is not good. It feels like they stiffed us to carry all these taxes that they're now not paying. So I guess could you comment on the inversion concept and also Medtronic specifically? Do you still support repealing medical tax for them?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, it's a really good question. And look, just real quick on the device tax, which, again, we were able to do and the president signed, for that repeal. again, my perspective is really flawed tax. It's a tax based on sales, not on profit, and essentially it was costing jobs and just hurting innovation, et cetera. Now the inversion issue is something very real, and this is something actually we are dealing with or need to deal with right now. And it's not just the Medtronic issue, right? It's so a number of other companies are talking about relocating their headquarters. So Medtronic does it essentially, right? Moves to Ireland by inverting and buying out Covidien, or merging with Covidien, right, and then having a new headquarters. But the biggest challenge here is that, once you start losing these headquartered companies, you lose the jobs, you lose the innovation, and you don't just lose them on paper, right, which is essentially what Medtronic has done. Is on paper they're not headquartered here, but eventually it becomes permanent. And the trend for inversions is really increased. About 51 different United States American companies have reincorporated to a different low-tax jurisdiction since 1982. But what's really interesting is that 20 of those have happened since 2012, so in the last three and a half years. And there have been 3 more announced in January of this year alone. So my belief is that the answer is not to sort of try to fence in companies, right, that are trying to compete and sell globally and expand their sales and services to where the customers are outside the United States. Well, we got to let them get the earnings back to the United States. And that means having an international tax reform process go forward where you're going to be allowing those sales to get, the earnings to come back. So there's something like $2 trillion that's trapped overseas. Medtronic is now going to be able or is able to access a lot of this money that has been trapped overseas. It doesn't affect all of it because they're still going to have the international tax component in a few years. It's going to be a challenge for them. So I don't feel like, like some of the policymakers have been burned on this. I do feel like we're getting burned by not addressing the competitive nature of the global economy, right? And so we're one of the only countries in the world that essentially is in this position where we are double taxing earnings that are sold overseas and they bring it back to the United States. We're one of the only ones that does that. Germany doesn't do it. All these other high industrial countries do not do this, and so that's why we're slowly losing them. And so I think the answer is to incentivize and fix the tax code rather than punish, right, and punish or try to put a fence around and keep them here. So that's best keep these folks here. But it is an urgency, and it's actually not the inversion issue, I think, that I'm fearful of. It's the acquisition of foreign companies buying American companies that's really going to accelerate and having takeovers. And that means we won't have large American companies essentially are headquartered here anymore at all. They will be all foreign-owned. And we're going to need partnership, again, on all sides on this one. Again, if anyone wants to ask a question, just dial *3 on your telephone. I think we got Walter on the line. Walter, thanks for waiting, if you're there.
Yes, I'm still here.
Thanks.
Hopefully you can hear me.
I can hear you well.
My question is that about the cost of living behind being a vulnerable adult and only getting Social Security. The cost of living thing, I haven't heard or seen any raise in that in a number of years, and I was curious as to see why, if there's anything that can be done, or even on my part, if there's something that me as an individual or even getting a group together as to see how can that come about, especially for those that's on Social Security. And one more question is the spin down thing. I get a PCA service, and when I was working at part-time, it didn't cost me as much to pay the spin down. Now it's costing me almost 3 times the amount that I was paying for my spin down service, and I still need the service of the PCA.
Oh, got it. Okay, so 2 different issues there. Well, first of all, thanks for sharing the comments. Look, I mean, as you mentioned, and I've heard from other seniors and people that are relying on Social Security in some aspect who have, essentially shared their concerns. Unfortunately, when last November, the Social Security Administration announced that there would once again not be an annual cost of living adjustment for 2016. It was actually the 3rd time during the administration that there had been no COLA increases. And the COLA increase, it's adjustment that's calculated using this complex formula, looking at consumer products and price index and all this sort of thing, and how they've increased it. while the CPI may have shrunk by something like 0.2% or something like that last year, that's actually primarily driven because of lower fuel costs, right? Fuel dropping. So I do know that prices on consumer goods have either remained flat or they're climbing, particularly in the area of health. And healthcare costs continue to increase far faster than inflation, which puts a huge, tremendous amount of pressure on seniors, for example. And so I think the simple fact is that you got to get the economy back on track, you get it growing at a faster rate. That'll ensure that everyone, because then the COLAs will go back up. You're going to get wage increases for everybody, and we should be doing a lot better with our economy. On the PCA issue and the spend down issue, I'm not as familiar with that, but I'm wondering if there's something we might be able to do or assist or check your situation with, say, Margaret in my office, who handles some of the casework on this, to see if there's something we might be able to do. And I've got your contact info here, and we should be able to follow up on that, on terms of what that spend down in the PCA is costing you and how you have to account for that. Okay, so thanks very much. We're going to keep rolling, so we try to get as many people in as we can. We've got Patrick on the line from Eden Prairie. Thanks for waiting, Patrick.
Hi, Congressman. Thank you for taking the call. Two questions. Number one is specifically what is being done about reducing the incident rates of fraudulent tax returns filings? And two, what is your position on term limits for Congress?
Okay, great. So term limits, and then the tax. You said it was tax fraud, you said, or?
Yeah, as you may know, there was over $6 billion 2 tax years ago that were fraudulently filed.
Gotcha. Yes. Okay. Oh, first of all, good question. Let me I'll mention the term limits issue right off the bat. It's really interesting because we always have students come out to D.C., right? And I love connecting with students when they come in, a lot of 8th graders in particular. So I always like to show them your congressional pin when you get elected. I always say, okay, there's a number on the back of the pin that represents when you got elected or kind of what your seniority is. And so like when I first got elected 7 years ago, the number on the back of my pin was 421. So like really low in the totem pole. Out of 435, I was 421. So it's like almost as low as you can be, right? But in about a 4-year period, well over half the House is turned over at brand new people. So there's been a huge surge of turnover. And so now I've moved up to like 206 and like basically within a 4-year period, which is crazy, right? And so I think there could be some benefits to term limits. There are a lot of people who have been here since, as I mentioned always to the kids also, the guy was here, is the number 1 on the back of his pin, here since the 1950s. It's like, really? I mean, obviously public service is public service. You should serve and move on, and then give other people a shot to do it, and have other life experiences come in here. So that's just sort of my perspective that, guaranteeing term limits is not going to provide a lot of solutions, but there has been a lot of turnover. And to pass term limits, it's not easy because it's not a simple vote. You literally have to pass the term limit measure in both the House and in the Senate with 2/3 of a vote. And then you have to get 3/4 of the states to pass that as well, and ratify that because it's a constitutional change. And so from a practical standpoint, we're just not going to get there, for instance. So on the tax fraud issue, now this is something I am familiar with. The earned income tax credit is actually the highest improper payment of any federal program on tax programs, actually. And so one thing I should mention also is that we are talking about a 27% overpayment rate, right, of errant payments. So this is something like $134 billion in EITC payments. That is a huge amount of money over a 10-year period. That is real money. And the other area is that the IRS, as you mentioned, sending out these tax returns to multiple addresses, is sent by something like, in 2012, there was one mailbox that got 46,000 tax returns to one address, one mailbox. It was somewhere in Atlanta, Georgia. It was like $46 million in tax refunds. So personally, I'm co-sponsoring legislation to solve the problem to protect taxpayer dollars. So it would require a Social Security number in order to claim a child tax credit, just as you are required, for instance, for other non-refundable or for refundable tax credits, to have a Social Security number. That's one thing we can do in the fraud area. And the other area is just, again, more oversight of the IRS. And the truth is, if you have a simpler tax code with all these different deductions, et cetera, you are going to have a much more, you don't have the ability to do fraud, essentially, right? You're going to cut down on fraud because you won't have as much fraud in the process. So if you have less forms to fill out, less loopholes, less expenditures, et cetera. So good question. And boy, if you or any others have ideas on that, on how to attack fraud, please share them. It's not like I got all the answers, but I actually want to follow through on this because, one, you deserve a government that spends its money as wisely as you do, and two, you deserve to make sure that the fraud payments are going to be addressed. And there's no reason why Visa should come in and testify and say that their error rate is like 0.001% or something like that, but then the IRS has an error rate of 27% on one tax program. That makes absolutely no sense when you can utilize technology. Okay, we're going to go to, I think it's Lane on the phone. Lane, if you're there.
Hi, can you hear me, Eric?
I can. Thanks for waiting.
Hey, thanks for doing these. Really appreciate it. I'm an independent, mostly vote Republican over the years, and I've been very happy to vote for you a few times. But sometimes I vote for Democrats, and I also enjoy, in Minnesota, the third party. And I was just curious, what's the tone and feeling with you and also your Republican and Democrat colleagues about being more inclusive and letting third-party candidates like Gary Johnson or Jill Stein into the national debates? I think that the current bar for entry into those national debates is like 15%, which is, as you know, a lot higher than a lot of the Republican or Democrat candidates that are running now are getting. And I'm just curious, and a lot of us, we know the candidates don't have a good chance of winning, but, hearing these other points of view and voices can, at the very least, improve the discussion, and some of us who have these concerns, they're at least being put on the national stage. I was just curious, is that going to, what's the tone with your colleagues? Is that going to change?
Yeah, Lane, that's actually a really good point. And in Minnesota, we have a little bit better experience with this, right, from the independent street, because, we've had independence party candidates that have been on the ballot statewide or in local legislative races, so it's provided more debate opportunity or, give and take on different issues. It's actually been really healthy. Now, the Independence Party has sort of faded away a little bit, right, and now does not have that major party status from what I understand. Now, on the national level, boy, I've not talked to any of my colleagues about it, but in general, the feedback I get from my colleagues from Democrats and Republicans is that nobody's sort of happy with the cast of characters that are running on both sides, in terms of, well, that's not the leader that we thought we would, want to be supporting or have as our standard bearer. I guess no one's talked about actually making sure that the debate process is set up. And I don't know if the parties do that, for instance, or kind of how that works. But I actually think it would be a good idea. When you mentioned the 15, I assume you meant like 15%, in like some voter approval or something like that, or recognition or support that says you're going to get on the debate stage or something. I suppose they have some sort of process, and I don't think we weigh in on that at all in terms of Congress. But there's some sort of separate institutions, debate institutions or whatever, that sort of set that up. But I personally actually think it's probably a good idea, probably this year more than ever, when we need more substantive talk about different issues or challenges and to be more inclusive. Look, I think it brings, rather than calling people names, you're actually going to be forced to offer ideas and solutions to counter other ideas and solutions. So it actually can be a really good thing. Okay. So anyway, that's just a couple of thoughts there. And if you have any other perspective, don't hesitate to let me know. Okay. We're going to keep rolling with questions. I think we've got Sam on the line. Sam, thanks for waiting.
Hi. Thanks for taking my call so much.
Yeah.
I want to tell you that I am a blind parent, and I work and pay taxes and volunteer, and I am consistently at the mercy of a Metro Mobility, which many riders have to ride, and they have no sense of appointment times or anything.
Right.
And I'm wondering what your stance is on self-driving vehicles.
Oh, yeah. That's actually a really good question. I mean, so my feeling is this, is that self-driving vehicles are coming our way. We should make sure that we are working with different companies and oversight, safety oversight, et cetera, to making sure that we're making sure that it's set up appropriately, safely. So when Google came, actually not too long ago, I rode in the Google self-driving car, and we took it right out in Washington. I mean, we took it right out in traffic, and I'm just sitting in the back seat, and the car is driving itself, and we're making turns, and we're going on the exit ramp, we're going on the freeway, and we were in pretty heavy traffic. And first when you get in, it's a little awkward, but it works, and it's only going to get better. So I actually support using these types of technologies. There are also a lot of technologies in the self-driving area that are going to enhance workforces or make it more challenging for some of our workforce, but it's going to enhance like truck driving, for mining, for instance, or in different areas, so that there's going to be more opportunity for using technology to be more efficient in the workplace. And then, whether it's people who use Metro Mobility, yourself or family members, self-driving cars I think they're coming, and we need to figure out or have a structure in place, federal, state, and local, to making sure that we're embracing it, and allows other folks to, again, be in the workforce, access different opportunities for transport. So I think it's a good thing, and having done it, and seeing that it works, shows that it's pretty impressive, and it's only going to get better. Unfortunately, we are going to have to close the questions because we had so many that came in within this hour period. Now, if you're on the line, do not hang up, because you go quickly into a voicemail. Either myself or my staff will get back to you essentially in the next 24 hours to get your concern, your question answered. We'll write up the email newsletter that'll go out this week. We'll incorporate the results of the poll results. We'll put all that up. If you're not signed up for the email newsletter, just sign up online. I just send this out every 2 weeks. We do a video conversation with folks like you that ask questions. My next Congress on Your Corners are going to be coming up in a week or two. We'll publish those on the website. I can't remember where they are right now, to be honest. We send out notices on those. We provide information on social media when we do those. The stronger the turnout, the better. I love doing those, so I hope to see you at those next events. I hope to engage with you at the next teletown hall meeting, and I want to thank you more than anything for just the privilege of representing you, because it is a privilege to be in public service. It's always a challenge being away from the family, et cetera, back and forth. But I only do it to help people and to make a difference, and that's what's rewarding. It's very frustrating. But last year was my most successful year in working bipartisanly, getting a number of initiatives passed with law enforcement, with human trafficking, and some other areas that have actually been signed into law, and some tax provisions. And so I'm going to keep focusing on that, keeping my head down, and just getting some stuff done. And look forward to keeping in touch with you and getting your continued ideas in the future. And so feel free to call anytime. And again, if my office or myself can help you with personal issues or red tape with the federal government, we're here to do that too. So if you're on the line, don't hang up. You're going automatically into that voicemail queue, and then we'll get right back to you. And have a great evening and a great night as the warmer weather in Minnesota is returning.
The teleforum has ended.